And now we begin to deal with laws that seem detailed and frustrating and even sometimes disgusting. Today is day 48, reading from Leviticus 14 and 15. And if it's not been rather redundant up to this point, it certainly gets there now. The point is that God is perfect and He's holy, and we are not. Some of sinful behaviors that are identified here, others are just, hey, listen, we live in a fallen and a broken world, and there are things that we have to do as a result of that brokenness. Some, for instance, houses will get mold. Even mold is a reminder in your life and my life that we live in a fallen world. It serves as a reminder of that fall. Everywhere we look in our lives, we see the fact, a reminder that things are under a curse. Even though Jesus came to break the curse He broke was the curse of sin in our lives. But there are still elements of that curse that rests upon nature, upon life, the curse of death, the curse of aging, the curse of sickness, the curse of pain and childbearing. All these things are still there. There are lots of offerings in these two chapters. The lepers are bringing offerings when they're healed. There's an offering when a house is to be purified. There are various discharges, and remember, these represent venereal diseases and transmittable diseases, things in the health arena that God is offering means by which purification can take place. And so there's these offerings. While reproduction and sexuality and the affiliated fluids are not gross or sinful in and of themselves, for God ordained these things, we've got to understand it even in the best of God's plans. In the fact there's a kind of brokenness that's attributed to them, and when there's violations, then we reap the consequences of them. We saw curses laid out in the very first book of the Bible with Adam and Eve. Adam, under the curse, now would work with thistles and thorns, and by the sweat of his brow, and yet there would be joy in that mission, but there would be a struggle attached to it. Eve also, who would now encompass under the curse labor pains and relational tensions. All this teaches us to look to God above for our joy, that nothing here has any sustaining, lasting joy. Then there's this issue of leprosy, and what a terrible, debilitating disease, and how it would literally eat away at the flesh, and how to manage that really is what is being discussed here. And remember that leprosy represents sin. It's a real disease, but in the scriptures, it's always used as an analogy to the fact that, like leprosy, sin rots away your heart. It eats away. It never stands still. Jesus came both bringing healing to sickness and deliverance from the leprosy of sin in our lives. There's a provision that is given here on how to accommodate and how to regulate. That's what we find in these two chapters. And there are lots of sacrifices and lots of offerings. First, these offerings and sacrifices are about giving something that cost you, that is animals or foods or oil. And the real sacrifice in life is we have to take something of value and be willing to surrender it to God. And then secondly, these offerings and sacrifices, it's about the element of substitution. Something else is covering the debt for your sin. And so an animal, a lamb, a bull, they would lay their hand on it. And that substitution was that animal was somehow he would represent my sin. My sin would be placed upon him. He would be slaughtered, laid innocent, but he would be laid down, and that would become a covering for my sin, just as also we find in Christ. And thirdly, sacrifices and offerings are about drawing near to God. The heart of offerings and sacrifices is that we are able, in fact, invited to draw near to God. Sinners are called to draw near to God. Thank God for that. And the fact is that God did not set a barrier up to say, hey, you're sinful and wicked and I'll have nothing to do with you. All of this that we're reading in Leviticus is God's attempt to break down the barrier and give opportunity for you and I to draw near to God. We see the leprous man getting healed and then going to get cleansed. Those who are healed must be cleansed, and that's what we find in the brazen laver, in which we wash ourselves. We are cleansed, sanctified, and set apart for holy purposes.